Hi, Facebook friends. Helen Archontou here, CEO of the YWCA of Northern New Jersey. So happy to have some time with you today. We're so happy to have YWTV to keep us together and keep us connected and bring you inspiring, engaging, and educational conversations to keep us linked during this time. As you know, June is Pride Month, and it's a wonderful opportunity for attention to be brought to issues for the LGBTQ community. As you also know, it's July and June has passed, but we love and the opportunity to be able to continue these discussions year round. It's wonderful that we have these months that honor and bring recognition. But the important thing to remember is that these are issues we should be supporting and discussing every single day of the year. And so this is a wonderful opportunity to be talking with our partner and organization that we support in here in New Jersey called Garden State Equality. For those of you that don't know Garden State Equality, I'm sure most of you do, but it's the largest advocacy organization of its kind in New Jersey. And it's since 2004 has led the efforts to ensure non-discrimination for transgender people and gender non-conforming people here in New Jersey. It has passed the most comprehensive anti-bullying law in the country. It has also put an end to conversion therapy efforts, and it brought marriage equality to the Garden State. Those are some tremendous accomplishments, for sure. All their work is informed by racial, economic, and disability justice concerns, and they are constantly working to address safe environments for youth, improvements of health services that meet LGBTQ community needs, and respectful treatment of seniors. Beyond all of this, Garden State Equality supports New Jersey activist community by bringing an LGBTQ lens to the shared struggle for justice. Now, as I'm sure everyone is aware from a lot of the conversation that happened over this past month of March, this year marks the 51st anniversary of the Stonewall riots, which happened on June 28th of 1969, when the New York police raided the Stonewall Inn, which was a gay club in Greenwich Village, and sparked a riot that led to 6 days of protests and violent clashes with law enforcement. The Stonewall riots were a catalyst for gay rights movement here in the United States and around the world. And we thought that, again, that this was a perfect time to continue the conversation with our friends at Garden State Equality. And so happy to have Bianca Chanel Mayes here with us today to chat. Welcome, Bianca.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I'm so excited to have this conversation and honored to be working with you all at the Y.
Well, let me tell you all a little bit about Bianca. She is a certified health education specialist at Garden State Equality for the health and wellness of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender and queer community. In her role, her work encompasses education initiatives that are centered on youth, older adults, public health, and providing LGBTQ competency training to healthcare providers. She's a graduate of Montclair State University. Woo, woo, so much. And she holds a master's in public health with a concentration in community health education. And Bianca happened to be the educator that came to the YWCA of Northern New Jersey a few months ago and did a wonderful training for our team because we're always looking to learn, and we were so grateful to have her. She was amazing. And I encourage all of your organizations or any group that you're connected with to reach out to Garden State Equality. Not trying to add to Bianca's miles driving in her car, but it's definitely a wonderful opportunity to learn more. So Bianca, welcome.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your work at Garden State Equality and how it's evolved over the time you've been there, because so much has happened in a
Yes,
short time, for sure.
absolutely. So when I started at Garden State Equality, there was only one health and wellness coordinator that worked previous to my hire. So a lot of the groundwork for the health and wellness space for Garden State Equality, I actually created. Uh, Many people might not be aware of this, but Garden State Equality's programmatic efforts are fairly new. We were actually a grassroots organization who at the time, whose sole purpose was to bring marriage equality to New Jersey. And so after that was established, people were saying does Garden State Equality go away? Does Garden State Equality still exist? And if so, what will Garden State Equality be responsible for? And so that's how the programmatic efforts got created. And so we have three initiatives. I do all the health and wellness work, so I kind of go in and out of all three of the initiatives. But we work with the healthcare system, making to make sure that there is LGBTQ affirming and competent providers. And then we also work specifically with schools. So we go into schools and make sure that students have a healthy and positive school experience if they're LGBTQ. And then we also work with our older adults, and that's making sure that the long-term care facilities are also given that LGBTQ competency training. And one of the reasons why Garden State Equality decided to stick around is because even though marriage equality passed, federally, there were still core issues in the community that needed to be addressed, that needed to be advocated for, that needed to be brought down to Trenton. And so the need for Garden State Equality still exists, it was still needed. So that's why we decided to put our heads together and say, okay, what does the community still want and need? And something else that helped us establish ourselves is the fact that we were collecting research. Part of the issue is there isn't enough research around LGBTQ people, especially LGBTQ people in New Jersey as well. So like being able to do research and programmatic efforts helped us establish ourselves in New Jersey as a statewide entity that can capture different voices from different community members. And, I've been able to transform my work from doing smaller presentations at community centers to working with healthcare systems and going to multiple sites and providing competency training, to go into conferences throughout New Jersey, conferences outside of New Jersey, talking.
Very busy.
Yes, very, very busy, because I think the misconception is that a lot of people don't know about the rights the LGBTQ community actually has. And so a lot of people think that marriage equality was the larger issue for the community, when in fact that, although it was an issue, it wasn't the sole core issue for the community.
Well, I can see, and I was watching even during the entire COVID crisis, how, as an organization, an advocacy organization, you quickly mobilized and were able to articulate the concerns for the community, and that kind of intersection of what was happening, for us, internationally and specifically for the community. So clearly your team is on it, and I know works so closely in Trenton, and this piece of you being out in the community is so important, from an education standpoint. So I thank you for your efforts. So can we talk a little bit about race and how that's impacted, with the LGBTQ community? I mean, obviously that's always, unfortunately an issue that this country is, still failing and not, work through our, racism issues and systemic racism issues that we have. But, in the last few months, obviously, since George Floyd was murdered, this has been a very present conversation. Tell us a little bit about the intersection there.
Absolutely. So I think I always want to start with, whenever you have a marginalized community, and there are people that there's levels to marginalization. So even within the LGBTQ community, if you are the more privileged of the marginalized community, sometimes you take on the role of the oppressor. And so within the LGBTQ community, racism is an issue. I can't help but think of the flag that sits behind me. So my virtual screen, the black and brown stripe was added in addition to the other stripes. In 2017, a Black queer woman that worked in the Office of LGBTQ Affairs in Philadelphia by the name of Amber Hikes added the black and brown stripe, specifically wanting to highlight racial inequality and the need for racial justice within the LGBTQ community. And when she added these stripes, people were very upset. within the community. There were a lot of LGBTQ people that were saying, you're making this about race. Why does this need to be added? This has nothing to do with sexual orientation and gender identity. But what they fail to realize is if we look at history itself, we actually see racism within the LGBTQ community. I mean, if you go back in time and still today, you can see segregation within the bar culture of the LGBTQ community. I mean, there was a time in which there were bars that specifically cisgender white gay men were the only ones that were allowed to patron this bar. So if you were a Black queer femme or a Black trans woman and tried to go into this bar, they would physically have you removed from that bar. And so to not address racism internally within the community, I think that that's a real disservice. I mean, when we're looking at the queer community, so often the voices that get lifted are people that are cisgender, are people that are either gay men or lesbian women, and usually they're white. And so to have someone speak for the community or get more resources when there are others that are more marginalized, right? Making sure that we're paying attention to each person's identity, we should really be making sure that the platforms that we give people are more representative of the most marginalized of the LGBTQ community. And I can't help but think of how we tell our stories. So often people think of Stonewall, right? We talk about Marsha P. Johnson and how she contributed to the riots, but what people don't know is when she, when her story was portrayed, they actually created another character in place of her for the Stonewall movie. They replaced a Black trans woman with a cisgender gay white man and said that he initiated the riots in Stonewall. And so you have complete erasure of the Black trans community. And I challenge people to think one of the reasons why the riots happened is because of police brutality. That is something that specifically the Black community has been advocating and fighting against for years. So in my mind, of course it makes sense that a Black trans woman is fighting against police brutality, because not only is she being harassed because of her gender identity, but now she's also being harassed because of her race as well. So to strip the whole story and make it seem like it came from another person is further evidence that there needs to be more racial justice within the community, because certain people are being left out.
Right. Still not getting the acceptance needed. And so, right now we are hearing a lot in the news and a lot of conversation about the need to support Black trans women. So could you speak to that specifically for anyone who's watching who may not understand the issue that today, where we are today? I mean, obviously, thank you for sharing the history of that, because that's so important to know and understand the evolution.
Absolutely.
Of the issue.
So when it comes to the Black trans community, again, this is definitely something that we as a community, as well as allies, need to do a better job of. When we're looking at, so often when we think of the trans community, people are quick to think of Caitlyn Jenner, right? Somehow she became the platform for the transgender community, but Caitlyn Jenner has something that we all wish we had, and that's money, right? Caitlyn Jenner has a lot of money, and she can afford to do whatever she wants, and she's not going to be in the same situations or have the same experiences as a Black trans woman. And so we need to make sure that we're getting our narrative specifically from Black trans women. And so what's happening now is people are starting to realize that Black trans women are being murdered, right? Black trans women are being murdered at a higher rate than any other population. When you're looking at the murders of trans women by race, Black women, it's more than 80%. And so we have to start thinking, what makes the experience of Black trans women different than white trans women, different than Latinx trans women? And the big reveal is the race issue, right? The life expectancy of a Black trans woman is significantly shorter than any other race of trans woman, right? The life expectancy is somewhere around 35, which is extremely young. Majority of the anti-LGBTQ homicides in this country are against Black LGBTQ people. And so we have to start looking at the intersections of race and sexual orientation and gender identity, because that's playing a big part here as to why Black trans women are being murdered and being forgotten about. What I'm seeing is when Black trans women are murdered, people are less likely to know their names. When you think about the Black Lives Matter movement, majority of people are able to think about Trayvon Martin or Tamir Rice or George Floyd. Majority of people can think of cisgender Black men's names. However, if you ask someone, do you know about a Black trans woman that was murdered? People can't think of her name. And so part of it is, as a country, we can do a better job at addressing when Black trans women die, or are murdered. And we need to make sure that when they do, if they do die, that we're not misgendering them. Because a lot of what's happening is when a trans woman is killed, when a Black trans woman is killed, the newspaper, the media will use that person's dead name. And in doing that, you're doing a disservice and you are misgendering someone, and you shouldn't misgender someone at all, right? Because that makes it hard to track what's happening to Black LGBTQ people if you're misgendering a Black trans person when they die. We need to have accurate numbers as to what's happening in this community because the rates are so high.
And I know this is an area that you all are doing, your advocacy work to try to make sure that there's, legislation and policies in place for these protections. So for those of us that want to be allies and want to be educated on the legislative policies, that would support LGBTQ plus communities, can you give us a sense of, where we should be focusing our efforts right now? What are the key issues?
Okay, yeah. So there are a lot of key issues. One of the main issues that I'm always telling people is we need to have the Equality Act. So I'm going to take us all back in time to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So this was specifically created to prohibit discrimination for public spaces and services, federally funded programs based off of sex, national origin, race, creed, etc. And on the basis of sex only meaning cisgender male and cisgender female. Now the problem is, before the Supreme Court actually passed the LGBTQ employment non-discrimination law, there was no federal law around non-discrimination for the LGBTQ community. None whatsoever. There's only laws that exist state by state, and there's a danger to that, right? Here in New Jersey, we have laws against discrimination for the LGBTQ community, so we're covered here. But you can go the next state over and be fired from your job, denied housing, denied public accommodation, denied jury service. And just now in 2020, we have protection for non-discrimination in employment. And so I always challenge people to think that, in the LGBTQ movement, marriage equality became the priority, but it actually was not the priority issue. It wasn't the main issue for the community. The community wanted protections for employment, protections for housing, protections for healthcare. Those three were the primary issues of the LGBTQ community. Marriage equality is important, But before the Supreme Court made that decision, that meant that yes, I can get married. But then if I lived in another state and I put a picture of me and my fiance on my desk, I can get fired for that. That means that we can go to different states and the housing authority can say, like, we don't want people like you to live here. It means that we can be denied public accommodation in spaces. We can be denied healthcare. These are major issues. And so I challenge people to fight for the Equality Act because there's still no federal protection. Even though here in New Jersey, we have amazing protections. I can't help but think of the rest of the LGBTQ community throughout the rest of the United States that still need that protection because it shouldn't be based on a state by state basis. If you're living in this country, you should be protected because you're living in this country.
For sure. So I know that maybe for anyone watching, could you give a little bit more details? We just had a landmark Supreme Court ruling happen in this country. Can you give a little bit more details around that, and where else we should be standing with our standing together to support the community?
So the LGBTQ community have been fighting for non-discrimination employment laws for a really, really long time. And it's important that people know that your employment in this country is connected to different things, right? If you lose your job, you can lose your health insurance, right? And then you're more likely to pay out of pocket. And for the LGBTQ community, people have been discriminated against in their employment for a very long time. We have trans people that would come out at work and tell people their gender identity and be fired the next day. And it was based specifically on the discrimination on sex, because the definition of sex in this country is not defined as LGBTQ inclusive. It is designed specifically for cisgender male and cisgender female. And so if you don't fall anywhere within those lines, then technically the law does not protect you. And so when people were deciding to challenge it, they were saying that this rule, this sex segregated rule, did not apply specifically to trans people. Because if you are a cisgender lesbian, gay, or bisexual person, technically the basis of sex should have protected you because you're still cisgender. So a lot of it had to do with the bigotry of the employers, but then with the trans piece, it was important to expand upon the basis of sex, specifically for people who are trans. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that your employer, depending on if it's public or private, was able to before make those kinds of decisions, right? When we're thinking about public employers, which were least likely to be able to tell employees if they were LGBTQ, oh, you can't work here, or fire them because of it. But the private employers are the ones that can mandate a certain kind of moral background or religious background or sexual orientation or gender identity of their employees, and that which contributed to why this was so important, because they had no federal protection whatsoever. And so I want to answer your question around what you can do further to support some of the legislation here. One of the biggest things that I always advocate for is there needs to be mandated collection for SOGI data, which is sexual orientation and gender identity. Part of what's happening in this country is no one knows the true amount of how many people are LGBTQ identified in this country, because it's not mandated to ask anywhere. It's not mandated to ask in hospitals or community centers. It's not mandated in education. And so what happens is, anecdotally, I know stories of LGBTQ people that need resources, that need help, that are being discriminated against in the workplace, that have been fired, or that have been denied public accommodation or housing. But that anecdotal data does not exist anywhere because the questions are not being asked by establishments, they're not being asked by agencies. And so I can say to New Jersey government, like, hey, there are people in uh, Essex County that need help, that need LGBTQ housing. But if they say, like, how many people need housing, I don't know.
You don't have the data. Yep.
I don't have the data. And so that's kind of dangerous because when we're looking at any other population group, we ask questions around race. We ask questions around gender. Sorry. We ask questions around socioeconomic status because we realize over time that these are important to know to be able to provide better services for people. But that hasn't been, that hasn't been advocated for enough. And it's not the sole responsibility of the LGBTQ communities to advocate for SOGI data collection. It helps everyone out, agencies, healthcare centers, it helps the government out, just knowing how many people identify one way so that we can address them better with services.
Oh, that's great to know. I mean, like I said, I think that, there are many of us out there here that want to be allies and, I think, hope one of the things that we learn and continue to learn is that our voices are heard when we speak, with them, and that, making sure that our elected officials are aware of the issues that are important to us actually does make an impact. Making a phone call, writing an email, sending a letter, it all is important to do. So thank you for sharing that. So is there anything big coming up at Garden State Equality that you'd like the YWTV community to know?
We are still here and doing our programming online. We're also coming up with a few fun events for fall, as well as right now, I don't know, we have to revisit this in a few weeks, but right now, we are still planning to do a lot of physical events in October, socially distant physical pride events in October. They're still working on doing New Jersey Pride in October, as well as some tabling opportunities for organizations as well. So I think stay tuned for that. Yep. We also on July 10th are going to have a Know Your Rights kind of workshop for the community. It's free. It's going to be on July 10th at 2:00. If you go to our website, you'll be able to register for it. And we're going to teach people, if you are advocating against police brutality, these are what your rights are. Here's how you do it safely. Here's how you stay connected. And we're going to do that in partnership with the ACLU. And I'm very, very excited about that. I know we're trying to also reschedule some of our LGBTQ curriculum workshop or curriculum conference, that was supposed to take place at Monmouth University. And then we're still gonna have our equality ball, which I'm very excited about. It's a very nice event where we get all swanky and dressed up, but we're going to have something similar to that in nature, and that's gonna be also in fall too. So I think the best thing that you can do for now, as we're finalizing a few details for our event, is to go to our website, and you'll be able to see, if you go to Garden State Equality and you go to the event page, you'll be able to see all of the events that I'm talking about for fall.
Oh, that's great. Well, we're going to make sure we link the Garden State Equality website in the comments here, so those of you watching will be able to get there very quickly and find out about all these great programs that Bianca is sharing with us. Bianca, we're so grateful for you to spend this time with us today and to share so much important information with us. And again, everyone watching, I encourage you to get educated on these issues and to be thinking about them in November when you're voting. Doesn't matter, who you're voting for, what office. You want to make sure that the people that are coming into office, doesn't matter if they're Republican or Democrat, it matters that they match your value system of the issues that are important to you. And today we learned about a lot of very important issues. So thank you for educating us on them, Bianca. Just know YWCA of Northern New Jersey very proudly stands beside Garden State Equality in the fight for equality for all. And we look forward to being at any of your tabling events when we get back to that. And until then, supporting you virtually. Just know we're here for sure. And so with that, we wish everyone a fabulous rest of your day. Stay well, stay healthy, and stay tuned for the upcoming episodes of YWTV. We have lots of important and inspiring, educational, and fun topics coming to you in the days that follow. So be well, stay tuned, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much, Bianca. Nice to see you.
Bye.
Bye.